I am a lost boy from Neverland, usually hanging out with Peter Pan, and when we're bored, we play in the woods, always on the run from Captain Hook. Run, run, lost boy, they say to me, away from all of reality. Neverland is home to lost boys like me, and lost boys like me are free. These are lyrics that belong to Ruth B. and are of pure imagination and fantasy that only a little boy can imagine. Or are they? Something about the woods are very appealing to a boy, with every curved stick becoming a sword, and every sapling becomes a fearless villain. But that's child's play, and not all lost boys make it back by the time the twilight fades and their dreams become their family's nightmare. Tonight we are focusing on a few lost boys that unfortunately is presumed to have crossed over to Neverland and frozen in time, being forever young. Here is their story, unfortunately their reality through the eyes of strangers. Garrett Bardley was last seen at approximately 8 o'clock a.m. on August 20th, 2004 at Cumberland Lake in the United Mountains of Summit County, Utah. He was fishing with his father. They were on a wilderness trip with Garrett's Boy Scout troop. Garrett's feet got wet, so he left to go back to their campsite about 150 yards away to change his shoes. His father kept his eyes on him until he was out of sight. He never arrived at the campsite and has never been heard from again. Garrett was not carrying a backpack or any food on him when he disappeared. An extensive search turned up few clues as to Garrett's whereabouts. A Nike ankle sock was found in a field of boulders half a mile from where Garrett was last seen. Garrett's mother said the sock was Garrett's, but one of the searchers claimed it was his own. The area where Garrett disappeared has very rough terrain. The day he vanished, the temperature was near freezing and it rained and hailed. Garrett has passed wilderness training courses offered by the Park Council. Police say there is no evidence that he was abducted, nor an animal attack. Garrett's family has never given up hope. Jared Negrate was also a Boy Scout. The 13-year-old 8th grader from El Monte was on his first overnight backpacking trip. He was last seen on Friday, July 19, 1991, around 6 o'clock p.m. when he fell behind his fellow scouts on a hike to the summit of Mount San Giorgio and San Bernardino National Forest in Southern California. The troop and their adult scoutmaster were hiking to the summit of Mount San Giorgio, which is 11,500 feet high. It was stated Jared became tired about 1,000 feet from the top and was told by the scoutmaster to remain behind alone while the others completed the hike. Another group of hikers spotted Jared straggling behind and notified the scout troop leader at the mountain summit. But the leader, an experienced hiker, said that he would pick up Jared on his way down. When the leader finally decided to descend the mountain, Jared was nowhere to be found. As soon as the troop leader realized that Jared had disappeared, he accompanied his 5 other scouts back to the base camp and then hiked about 5 miles in the dark to get help. San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputies, along with search and rescue teams from as far away as Sierra Madre and Santa Dimas, began searching a 130 square mile area of the San Giorgio Wilderness, a rocky tree-lined terrain. Within 3 days, their search was focused on a 6 square mile area where a footprint believed to match one of Jared's high-topped tennis shoes was found. Searchers also discovered beef jerky and candy wrappers believed to have been dropped by the scout. The most heartbreaking clue found during the investigation was the recovery of Jared's camera. The film was later developed, and most of the photos were landscape scenes apparently taken before Jared went missing. but the final picture on the roll was of Jared apparently after his disappearance into the dark, taking a picture of himself. Only his eyes and nose are visible. It is believed that Jared lost the camera when he slid down a portion of the mountainside toward the water. At least 70 officers, some of whom were airlifted by helicopter into the forest, and horseback riders as well as helicopters with infrared were deployed. Over the next 2 weeks after he vanished, as many as 3,000 people were scouring 50 square miles of the San Bernardino National Forest from Alaris Oaks to Whitewater Canyon. No further clues were found. Jared had vanished. What happened on that day, July 1991? Did he fall off the trail and slip down the mountainside? But why, after an extensive search, wasn't the body or remains found? Was he abducted? Despite the discovery of the camera and its pictures, Jared remains missing. Jared is a Hispanic male, black hair, brown eyes. Jared has a small birthmark on his right cheek. He wears eyeglasses with brown plastic frames. He was wearing a tan t-shirt, possibly a Boy Scout style, green Boy Scout pants, and black high-top pro-wing sneakers. Have you ever dropped an object unknowingly, then try to go back and retrace your steps, but never find the object ever again? You would think a body with clothing would be easy to spot in the woods, especially when someone only steps feet away from you and disappears. But people have perished in the wilderness and never found, even though there would be hundreds in the woods searching for them, just like little Sammy. Sammy Bohike, an 8-year-old boy from Portland, Oregon, was last seen by his father, Kenneth, on October 14, 2006, around 4 o'clock p.m. near the Cleetwood Cove area at Crater Lake. Samuel suffers from Asperger's syndrome, a high-functioning form of autism. As a result of his condition, he has extreme reactions to bright lights and loud noises, in which complicated the work of more than 200 search and rescue workers who arrived at Crater Lake after Sammy's disappearance on October 14th, which meant they could not use horns or whistles. The boy and his father had stopped to play tag on a cinder slope where Sammy saw something yellow. He thought and hoped that might be gold. Kenneth Bohike, Sammy's father, chased after him, he said, but Sammy thought it was a game and stayed approximately 50 feet ahead of him. He stated, "I have never caught up with him, and at the point he disappeared over the top somewhere, and I lost him." As darkness approached and his dad walked a short distance to the car so the two that could return to their rented cabin near Diamond Lake, Sammy stayed on the slope, refusing to come down. The search party of more than 200 people combining an area of 6 square miles or 4,000 acres. For a week, searchers scoured the area with dogs, helicopters, and heat-sensing cameras, but no trace of the boy was ever found. Intermittent searches continued after this despite heavy snowfalls in the area, and no sign of Sammy was ever found. Sammy had camping experience, but given his age, he had no formal training in wilderness survival. He was wearing a winter coat, long-sleeved t-shirt, cargo pants, and light shoes when he went missing. Officials said they found no clues of his whereabouts after the first day, even though a helicopter crew spotted some tracks, but they turned out to be from wildlife. Authorities said search efforts for Sammy have came up absolutely empty over the years. Another 8-year-old that has never been found is Derek. It was less than 3 weeks before Christmas in 1998 when 8-year-old Derek Engelbrenston joined his father and grandfather on a trip to the Winneman National Forest in Oregon. No stranger to the great outdoors, Derek had earned himself the nickname Bear Boy, and could often be found hunting or scavenging for mushrooms with his family. Following their tradition, the family had headed out to the forest on December 5th to find the Christmas tree that would decorate their Oregon home that year. They started their search on the mountainside of Pelican Butte, a steep and densely wooded area almost 4,000 feet above Upper Klamath Lake. Derek's father, Robert, and grandfather, Bob, set out on separate paths, but when they regrouped, less than an hour later, they realized that Derek was nowhere to be found. Each thinking the other had been watching him, the little boy had wandered off into the forest. After an hour of searching, Derek's father flagged down a driver to call 911, but it would be another 2 hours before police arrived at the scene, in part due to the whiteout conditions, in part due to a search and rescue banquet taking place that police did not want to disturb. An expert tracker, Derek's grandfather, managed to retrack his steps of his grandson back to where their pickup was parked. After going up the hill and then looping back around, Derek had stopped to make a snow angel in the road. Derek had a small hatchet with him at the time, and the cuts were also found in the trees in the same general area. Unfortunately, since that time of the snowplow had passed through, destroying any other tracks the little boy had made. Word soon spread of Derek's disappearance, and volunteers quickly grouped together to search for the snow-covered mountain, which by that time it was clouded with darkness. His mother, Lori, kept watch in a donated camper van at the edge of the woods, a bonfire burning brightly to help Derek find his way home. Over the next couple of weeks, on a snowmobile and on foot, hundreds of people would search Pelican Butte, but for the police, their search was good as it was over. After 8 days, they pronounced Derek dead, asserting that there was no way he could or would have survived the inclement weather. As the volunteers soldiered on, they found several potential clues: a makeshift shelter, candy wrappers, and a bookmark from Derek's school. But on December 18th, this search ended too, with the family concerned that the sub-zero temperatures were putting the volunteers at risk. For the next 2 years, Derek's parents devoted every spare moment combing through the mountains for their boy, spending thousands of dollars on psychics and search boats until they eventually went bankrupt. Derek was wearing a blue snowmobile suit, a size 12 or 14 denim jacket, navy blue Route 66 pants, a black sweatshirt, an Oakland A's t-shirt, a hat, felt-lined camouflage print boots, and gloves with the Goosebumps logo on him. He is a Caucasian male, brown hair, hazel eyes. Derek has dog bite scars on his chin between his nostrils and under his nose. He has a cowlick. His nickname is Bear Boy due to his love for the outdoors. Even after 20 years, you can still see all the nails and the tacks left in the trees in Klamath County. After all this time, Derek's mom still has hope that he will one day walk through her front door. Unfortunately, his secrets are still in the woods. Douglas Legg, Doug or Dougie as he was known, was 4'6", weighing 76 pounds, was a keen hiker and a mini woodsman despite his young age. Dougie was 8 years old when he vanished off his grandparents' estate on Saturday afternoon, July 10th, 1971. Dougie and his uncle set out on a hike around the San Antonio estate near Newcomb in the Adirondack Mountains, and Dougie was never seen again. While hiking, his uncle seen there was poison ivy on the trails and told Dougie to go back to the lodge to change from shorts to long pants. The walk was around half a mile. He passed his older brother and cousin about 50 to 60 yards from the main lodge building. He never returned to the hike with his uncle. That evening, as the temperatures dropped, the family called the state police and locals from the town to search for Dougie. Searches for Dougie went throughout the night and into the next day. The next day, a formal search was started by forest rangers using dogs. Helicopters were deployed, and the U.S. Air Force Base in Plattsburgh sent planes equipped with heat-detected infrared flare. At the height of the search, close to 1,000 volunteers were scouring the area for Dougie. The wilderness terrain had swamp, bogs, dense forest, and fallen trees, which made the search dangerous and very difficult. During the search, the weather deteriorated with heavy rain and falling temperatures to around 40 degrees, which added to the dangers for Dougie as well as the searchers. A bloodhound found a scent, but it was lost at the edge of a swampy pond. The pond was drained and dragged. Nothing was found. Then sneaker tracks were found about 2 miles away at the Ward Pond on the 5th day of the search, but the rain had washed away any chance of dogs picking up a scent. A week after Dougie disappeared, the family hired a specialized search team of over 20 mountain men from the California Sierra Madre Mountains. Again, no luck. After 6 weeks, the state police called off Dougie's search. In 1993, a man came forward to report to officials that he had come across a small skull and partial skeleton in 1973, which he believed to be human. He and a friend were hunting and became separated as he chased a deer across the field leading to a 21-acre island in Newcomb Lake, approximately a half a mile from the lodge. He didn't report it in 1973, he said, because he did not know about the case at the time and had been on leave from the Navy for 4 days and not where he was supposed to be. The man traveled back to the area to show investigators the area where he found the remains, but unfortunately, they found nothing and there was no proof the remains the man found back in 1973 belonged to Dougie. On the day of his disappearance, Dougie was wearing a white short-sleeved polo shirt with navy blue stripes on the collar, navy blue shorts, and black sneakers with a circular sole pattern. He had a slight speech impediment. Dougie has never been found. Is he still out there somewhere? Another little boy that has remained lost in the vast wilderness is Dennis. He was in the Great Smoky Mountains while his family was taking part in their family tradition, their family camping trip. Dennis Martin, a 6-year-old from Knoxville, Tennessee, was visiting the Great Smoky Mountains National Park along with his father, grandfather, and older brother on Father's Day weekend in 1969. The camping trip was a family tradition for the Martins. The family hiked from Cades Cove to Russell Field and camped overnight. The next day, they hiked to Spence Field near the Appalachian Trail, where they planned to spend the night. Dennis disappeared on June 14th around 4:30 p.m. while planning on surprising or scaring the adults with his brother and other children from a separate family where the Martins were camping with. He was last seen by his father going behind a bush to hide, intending on surprising the adults with the other children. After not seeing him for about 5 minutes, and when all the other children had returned to the campsite, his father became concerned and began searching for him. His father ran down the trail for nearly 2 miles until he was sure he could not have had gotten too far away. After several hours, they sought help from the National Park Service rangers. Search efforts, including a separate search by the National Guard and Special Forces, found no trace. Heavy rains during the first day's search hampered all efforts. Up to 1,400 people were involved in the search for him. Footprints were found in the area. The child-sized footprints led to a stream where they disappeared. The tracks indicated that one footprint was barefoot, while the other was in an Oxford or a tennis shoe. Later, a shoe and sock were also found. By June 22nd, 56 square miles of ground had been covered. More than 1,000 searchers continued to look until June 26, when the search was cut back. The search was officially closed down on September 14, 1969. As of 2020, it is still the largest search in the history of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The next 3 little boys were mere toddlers when they walked off into the unforgiving woods that rarely gives up its lost children. But one did have a small portion of his remains found, but in a very strange setting. This is Jared's story. On October 2nd, 1999, 3-year-old Jared Atirdo, his 6-year-old sister Jocelyn, and 11 other adults were hiking the Big South Trail near Rocky Mountains National Park in Colorado. While hiking, Jared ran ahead no more than 100 feet and stopped to talk with some fishermen. Following this, Jared continued down the trail ahead of the group. This would be the last time anyone has seen Jared. In the following days, a massive search and rescue operation failed to turn up any evidence of Jared. 4 long years dragged on until hikers were 500 feet above the Big South Trail and over 2 miles from the trailhead when they found scattered clothing. Larimer County Sheriff's was notified and deputies went to the scene and found remains that were consistent to be Jared's. The father was called, and at this time they escorted him down the trail to the point just below the remains. The father was taken to an area and was shown where the sweatpants were found. Then he was taken to where Jared's shoes were found. The father said it did not appear to him that the shoes had been through the elements for 4 winters. The shoes were clean and the colors were vibrant. Searchers also found the sweater Jared was wearing that had some unusual hairs around the neckline. Crime scene technicians found the top of his skull and 1 tooth in the general area. No other bones were found. Jared's personal items that were not found were his t-shirt and underwear. It has been reported that his sweatpants were inside out when they found them. Later, at the press conference, the sheriff stated he wasn't positive what happened to Jared. He thought it was possible that a mountain lion killed him, but there wasn't significant evidence to support that. They sent all of the clothing, the top of the skull, and tooth to the Bureau for DNA analysts. It was reported that no blood of any type was found on the clothing. The hair they collected off Jared's sweater collar was also sent to the lab. It was reported that the hairs were not human and not a mountain lion. If something dragged him 500 feet up a rocky steep incline, his shoes would be banged or dragged on the ground and would definitely fall off. Yet they were found near the clothes. When the shoes were examined, there were no scuff marks or significant scratches near the toes or the back of the shoes. And if drugged, like they are speculating, it would have showed evidence like scuff marks. The other point is the shoes still looked new, and the colors were still very vibrant, even after being out in the wilderness for 4 winters. There was no mold inside the shoes or evidence that there had been any significant snow or water on them. Not to mention the lack of serious damage to the sweater near the stomach and neck area. Also, where was the rest of his body? How did an animal take his pants off? It was stated by a family member that they were turned inside out when found. The evidence or the lack of evidence and circumstances made the experts believe that something else had happened. The canines never picked up Jared's scent. It was reported that searchers on foot had never made it up to the 9,120-foot elevation at Jared's skull and tooth were found. The Air Force helicopter would have likely searched that area had it not crashed on the Sunday following his disappearance en route to help search for the 3-year-old child. Additional tests by the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, including blood and hair on the clothing the hikers found, revealed little about what killed Jared. His death certificate indicates the manner of death as undetermined, probable mountain lion attack. Jared's father still has the remains that was found that day. That's all he has left of his son. In October of 2000, a bill was signed dedicating the trail to Jared. It has been stated that it's believed that little Jared met foul play, but that has never been proven. It has been stated that it's believed that little Dior met foul play, but that has never been proven. Does the mountains surrounding Timber Creek still hear his playful giggles? Dior was last seen in Lemhi County, Idaho on July 10, 2015. He was with his parents, Jessica Mitchell and Vernal Dior Kuntz Sr., his great-grandfather Robert Walton, and the grandfather's friend Isaac Renwan. The group was camping at Timber Creek Campground in a remote area about 10 miles west of Leadore, Idaho. At 2:35 p.m., Jessica called 911 and said her son had disappeared. According to her, she left Dior with Walton, and she and Dior Sr. went to explore the campground, and when they returned about 10 to 15 minutes later, the child was gone. Dior's father thought that the boy's great-grandfather was watching him. The great-grandfather thought the boy's dad was watching him. It was during this 7 to 10 minute time period when nobody was watching him, he apparently disappeared. The parents asked the 2-year-old if he wanted to stay with his grandfather or go fishing, to which he allegedly began walking back to be with Walton. Later, Walton said he saw his grandson near the creek, took his eyes off the boy for just a moment, and when he looked back, he was gone. Once they realized the 2-year-old was missing, the family frantically searched the surrounding area for about an hour before dialing 911. According to his mother, he never went anywhere without his blanket, his cup, or his toy monkey. All these items were left at the campground. When he disappeared, he was wearing a camouflage jacket, blue pajama bottoms, and cowboy boots. An extensive search of the area turned up with no indication of his whereabouts. Authorities arrived at the campsite and interviewed the family, believing the boy could have wandered from the campsite. A massive search effort was then launched. The search radius was just over 3 miles from the Timber Creek campground. The searchers struggled with steep mountains, thick vegetation, and swampy areas. Divers searched the reservoir on 4 different occasions, including the first day of the search. A helicopter was used to search the water and use sonar technology to scan the reservoir. The search for Dior has involved divers, dogs, horseback riders, aircraft, ATVs, emergency medical technicians, law enforcement officers, and volunteers. At one time, more than 150 people were involved with the search for him. But despite these efforts, no sign of Dior has ever been found. 6 months later, the county sheriff's office named the father and mother as suspects in their child's disappearance due to the couple failing their polygraph tests that were administered by the FBI, and there was inconsistencies in the various interviews conducted by authorities. Neither parent has ever been charged. The authorities have ruled out the possibility that he was attacked by an animal or abducted, and now they are leaning towards it being a homicide. They are also starting to believe that the little boy was never at the campsite, but there is no proof if he was or was not camping with the family that summer day. When children go missing, families spend months, years, and even decades trying to find out what happened to their lost loved one. But getting closure and some sort of resolution is never easy, especially when there's limited evidence. And one of the most mysterious disappearances is that of Dior Kuntz. Dior is still missing and foul play is suspected, but no evidence has ever been found. Little Bobby was only 4 when his family only left his side for a couple of minutes, but in those minutes, he became lost forever. It was a hot summer's day on August 3rd, 1963. Bobby and 2 of his brothers, Jim, age 6, and Bill, age 10, went on a hike with their mother, Edna, alongside a logging road near their campsite at the Deep Lake Resort in northern Stevens County. Ted had decided to stay at the campsite that afternoon and go fishing with his father instead. As they hiked along, Bill asked his mother if he could check out the nearby creek, which he could hear from the trail. She agreed and told Jim to wait with Bobby while she went to look for the creek with their brother. They would only be a few minutes, she said. However, Jim decided that instead of staying with Bobby, he would follow Bill and his mother, leaving Bobby standing alone. After a few minutes, they returned to where Bobby had been left. Bobby was nowhere to be seen. He had been barefoot, but yet no footprints were found. Over 500 people a day participated in the 9-day search for Bobby, drawing thousands of volunteers deep into the remote Deep Lake area that surrounded the campsite. The search area was around 20 miles south of the Canadian border and was extremely undeveloped. It was hilly and rugged and the search was a difficult one. Bloodhounds were called in to assist in the search and picked his scent up quickly. The bloodhounds ran for 2 miles before stopping at a fork in the road. During the search, the sheriff considered that Bobby could have been snatched by an eagle. He was also open to the theory that Bobby had been abducted. However, due to the remote location of where the family was, he said that it was unlikely. In March of 1964, a letter from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover said that no evidence to indicate a kidnapping had occurred. Despite this, Sheriff Halter urged Canadian doctors to keep an eye out for Bobby in case he had been abducted and was living with a new family. He described to the doctors that Bobby had a chocolate allergy, was susceptible to ear infections, and that he had difficulty pronouncing R and C sounds. To this day, Bobby's brothers still dwell on their actions that afternoon. Bobby has never been seen or heard from again. Although they were all young children at the time, they still question what would have happened if they didn't go to the creek, or if they didn't leave Bobby standing alone, if even just for a brief moment. All missing children cases are bizarre in their own way, and as parents we see things that should have been done differently, but we really don't know what the circumstances were surrounding the family dynamics in some cases. This next case in particular. Justin Richardson was born on June 6, 1988, following his parents' divorce. Justin lived with his father in Tucson, Arizona. He was described as a popular teen with many friends. On June 29, 2001, 13-year-old Justin and 3 friends, who were all between the ages of 18 and 21, had gone into an area a few miles south of Grand Canyon National Park. Authorities believe he had been partying and was under the influence of drugs, possibly methamphetamine. Justin and his 3 friends got separated, and 2 of them got lost. Justin and another friend went back to Tucson and asked another friend to help look for the missing pair. In the meantime, the 2 missing ones were located by Grand Canyon Railway employees south of Tucson, but Justin did not know this. Justin and another one of his friends returned to the forest at a spot 5 miles from Tucson and 15 miles from where their friend had been found sometime earlier. His companion went to sleep at 9 o'clock a.m. When he woke up at 5 o'clock p.m., Justin was gone. His companion was able to make his way to a dirt road where he hitched a ride back to Tucson. He never reported Justin missing. Justin has never been heard from again. An extensive search of the area turned up of no sign of him. Justin had been to the area 4 times before he disappeared and was very familiar with this area. Authorities aren't sure whether he did in fact lose track of his surroundings. It's possible that Justin was picked up hitchhiking by a passing motorist, and he may have tried to go to Chicago, Illinois to see his girlfriend. Investigators believe foul play is possible in Justin's case and could have been killed in the forest shortly after his disappearance. Investigators believe he'd been abusing drugs and alcohol for about a year prior to him going missing. After interviewing the men with Justin that day he disappeared, authorities at the time ruled out foul play, and although they continue to keep track of the persons of interest in this case more than 15 years later. One of the men is deceased, although that incident doesn't appear to be related to Justin's case. In 2014, Justin's case was turned over to the Cold Case Unit, which uncovered evidence that he did in fact return to the lodge after he was last seen, although they declined to say what the evidence was. Justin's case remains unsolved. At the time of his disappearance, Justin was 4'10", 100 pounds, with brown hair and brown eyes. His hair was shaved on the sides and long on the top. He was wearing a red Chicago Bulls baseball jersey and denim shorts. He was 4'10", 100 pounds, 13-year-old boy in the company of 3 men, all between 18 and 21, going to a party with meth as an appetizer with plans to sleep out in the woods that night while doing hardcore drugs. What else could go wrong? Simply horrifying. During the initial investigation, detectives learned that the 13-year-old had free reign of his family's home. At the point of his disappearance, we could urge that if this child had been supervised properly, that his disappearance may have never happened, but most children that disappear and vanish within feet from a loving parent and never seen again. Where are these lost boys? Did a person or animal choose their faith? Did they fall to their demise off a rocky cliff? We may never know, but it's much easier to think of them as the inhabitants of the mystical forest, somewhere between space and time, in their very own Neverland, where they cease to age and will stay forever young, as they do in the hearts of their families and friends forever. Neverland, second star to the right, and straight on till morning. May peace be with them all. Subscribe to the Missing Truth YouTube channel to receive updates on more cases such as these, and like us on our Facebook page. Remember, some sort of truth remains in a lie.